Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats your boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing Elsbeth Season 2, Episode 14. So before I get into the video, I just want to say thank you to everybody who likes my videos, subscribes to my channel, leaves me comments. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I read all of my comments. So if you have any questions about this episode or any questions or comments about my review, please leave them below. So this episode actually has Teddy and his boyfriend Roy in it. And I love Teddy. I love Elsbeth when she's around her family. She's such a happy person and so positive with her work family, with Kayla and the captain. But when she's around Teddy, she just lights up. And so it's just, I guess it's kind of hard to see because she's such a happy person anyways. But when Teddy's around, you can just tell she just glows. And you can tell from previous episodes when Roy visits, she really likes Roy and they get along great, which I think is going to come into play because maybe she gets along too well with their son's boyfriend, which I know sometimes that can cause a problem, right? Because you want them to get along, but you don't want them to be best friends. So her initials are E.T. and so they call her E.T. and they do the little for E.T. and I think Teddy sees it and you can kind of see he's like, okay, I'm not sure I like that my boyfriend and my mom are best friends. So you kind of see that early on in the episode and you can see, it kind of comes to a head at the end of the episode, which I'll go over. But the beginning of the episode talking about how they're so close and best friends, they go on a tour and it's a famous crime tour. And they go into this restaurant where some famous mobster was killed. I don't know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact time, but a long time ago. And they go and, they sit at the table and the guy who does the tour, he's like going over the entire scene. He's sitting in the restaurant and he comes in and he grabs a corkscrew and stabs him and then he shoots him twice and then he leaves and, you can still see a drop of blood that's still on the floor under, and he's great. He does a great tour guide. He gets into it. This is what he had for dinner. Was his last meal. And then of course they eat the last meal that this mobster had. And they're saying a rival monster killed him. So, Elsbeth is listening to this story and I know her wheels are turning in her head. She's like, wait, that doesn't make sense. I mean, if he was a mobster and he wanted to come in to kill his opponent, like he's coming in and he's seeing him head on. So how did he get him surprised, right? And how come he grabbed a corkscrew? Like if he knew he was going to kill him, why didn't he shoot him first? So like Elsbeth is kind of playing this out. Like this doesn't really make sense, right? And then she recognizes the person that owns the restaurant. So the reason how we know exactly how this went down was there was only one person in the restaurant that witnessed the whole scene, and he was a young waiter. And he ends up marrying, the one of the family members that he died. Obviously, he died there in the restaurant. And they got married and they took over the restaurant. But him dying started a mob war. And let me see, I had that written down because I thought that was so fascinating. 14 people were killed in the mob war. So 14 funerals in 3 months. So basically her entire family was wiped out. She's the only one left. And she marries, like I said, the young waiter who witnessed it all. So his name is Gene, and he married basically the last person alive in the mob, the 19-year-old girl. So I can't imagine going through 14 funerals in 3 months, having a big family, and them all passing away. So that's got to be hard. You find out your family member died in this restaurant that you own. and then that starts a war, and they just go back and forth and kill every member in your family except you. And then you later find out that she was pregnant at 19. So she's pregnant when this war starts, and she loses every family member. So maybe that's why she married him too. Like, she's all alone, she's going through all of this. So, Elsbeth is kind of like, there's something not right here. So she asked Jean, who is the only witness, like I said, who married her. Her name was like Peretta, and I apologize, I'm saying her name wrong, because I never really got the gist of what her name was. They kind of said it really fast in the episode. But at any rate, Jean is the only witness, and he married her. She's the last member of that mob family. She was 19 and pregnant. So I feel like, that kind of ended that. I don't really know what happened after that. You just know that ended the mob war after everybody in the family died. So you can tell that Gene kind of like wanted to talk to Elsbeth. So he writes down, an address and a time. So Elsbeth goes to meet them, and you see the police there, and he was a hit and run, but they found out that the person didn't slow down. So somebody attempted to kill Gene before he could talk to Elsbeth. So I'm like, okay, obviously, Elsbeth is right. That's not really how the murder went down, which means the only witness, Jean, obviously lied. Why did he lie? Who really killed him, right? And the wife is being very suspicious. She's very controlling. You saw her yell at Jean right in front of Elsbeth. And it's Alyssa Milano, which is an amazing actress. So I'm like, of course she's the killer, right? Because she's guest starring, and she's being really nosy and condescending, and rude to her husband. And, you could just tell that character is hiding something. So I'm like, okay, it was probably her. Once I find out she was pregnant at 19 when this whole thing started, I'm like, yeah, she's definitely the killer, because it's not a coincidence that she was 19 and pregnant when this whole thing went down, and then she marries Jean. So I'm like, what is she covering up? So I was kind of suspicious of her from the beginning. And like I say, on Elsbeth, most of the time the guest characters or guest, stars are the bad people. So, but Alyssa Milano, oh my gosh, she does an amazing job as the bad person, as the villain on this episode. So kudos to her. I loved it. So Elsbeth talks to Jean Jr., the child she was pregnant with at 19. And of course, he's out of college now. So this is, 20 plus years later. And he went to business school, but he wasn't really involved with the restaurant. And Elsbeth obviously knows there's something wrong. Like I say, when she went on the crime tour, she's like, wait, that doesn't make sense. This mob hit how it was described. And they're like, no, this is exactly how it was, because we have our witness. So she wants to exhume the body of the mobster, but they can't do that without proof, right? And no judge is going to agree to have tests of a body and get it unburied without the family. And of course, the wife, she's like, no, Jean can't say anything. She's the only living relative left. And obviously we think she's a killer, Alyssa Milano, so she's not going to agree to it. So Captain Wagner was like, you might want to go to Judge Crawford. He has a lot of pull, and the other judges aren't going to do it. Maybe he's the one who's not allowing this to happen. Because remember, Judge Crawford is still lurking. He's still that side case that we want to prove. He's that dirty judge. So Elsbeth does have a scene with them, and, maybe you could pull some strings. This is, and Captain basically laughs and says to Elsbeth, maybe it would help if you could get a new confession. And he kind of laughs it off. And Elsbeth is like, how am I going to get a new confession, right? But that's what Judge Crawford laughs off. So as soon as I see that, I'm like, I don't know how she's going to get a new confession, but I bet she is, because she's going to say, well, Judge Crawford, you said if I could get a new confession, maybe you could pull some strings and have his body resumed. So I don't know how, but I just had a feeling she's going to get a confession because she wants to prove him wrong, right? So, So they go after, and the wife, Alyssa Milano's character, she goes after Teddy, right? Roy is visiting Teddy, and Elsbeth walks up and she's talking to him. And Elsbeth kind of freaks out because she knows at this point, like, this woman is dangerous. She's part of the mob family. She killed one of her own. And, she knows Elsbeth is on to her. So she's talking to her family, and Teddy is like, "Oh yeah, she knows about Roy and she knows about my job." And Elsbeth is just like, "Wow, she's doing her research. She's going after my family," which is like a low blow. But at the same time, she wants Elsbeth to back off, and this is like she's threatening her. So Teddy goes in the house, and Elsbeth kind of has a one-on-one with her, like, "How dare you go after my family?" She's like, "Well, you're going after mine." Because Elsbeth was seen talking to Gene Jr., just talking to him and trying to get information. So we do know that he went to business school, and they had pictures of him when he was younger in college, and he looks identical to the family member that was killed. So I'm like, yep, Alyssa Milano was her character was pregnant, and he said something, or whatever, and she killed him. And then she married Gene and told Gene to tell him, like, you saw what happened and it was the other family, right? So I kind of assumed she had a play in it because, like I say, you could tell as soon as you see Alyssa Milano's character, she just looks sketchy. You know what I mean? Like, she's, doesn't want anybody talking about it. She was skeptical of Gene. So I'm like, I can't believe. I mean, she killed her own family member, and that's what started the mob war. And then 14 people, they killed her entire family. And it all started with her. She's the one who created the story. She's the one who killed him. And then she created the story about it being a rival mob family. And they just went back and forth. So, I mean, I just can't even imagine. And then the waiter, Gene, has always been in love with her. I mean, he was around the same age as her. So he was like, all right, I'll say a mobster killed him and we'll get married and you'll get out of the mob business. Like, that was Gene's deal. I'll marry you. I'll pretend the child is mine, but you have to promise to get out of this, business. And that was their agreement. So, I mean, he's raising this child as his own when really it's the dead guy. So Elsbeth finally gets to talk to Gene, right? He comes out of surgery. He's in recovery. And Alyssa Milano gets to him first. And Elsbeth goes to talk to him, and he's just like, he's closed-lipped. He won't say anything. I don't really remember what happened. And Elsbeth's like, you have an injury on your shoulder, not a head injury. How did you already forget what you were going to tell me? But yeah, so, I mean, obviously Alyssa Milano threatened him. But eventually, Elsbeth is Elsbeth, and she gets him to talk. And he says, yeah, he was like, yeah, that was our agreement, right? And then our accountant gets arrested, and I find out this entire time she's stayed in the business, these 20 years, and so I don't want my son to work for the restaurant because I don't want Gene Jr. to get mixed up in all this. But she always wins. And that's what he said. And I'm thinking, of course, because she's part of the mob family. And if you disagree, you get killed. So she wants to bring her son into the business because, the accountant that was cooking the books is now being investigated. And they need a new accountant. And her son went to business school. And so Gene Sr. is like, I don't want my son to get messed up in this. I know he's not biologically my son, but he's my son. So Elsbeth was like, all right, well, this is what we can do. You can confess to the crime even though you didn't commit it. That will be enough to exhume the body. We'll have the DNA to catch the real killer. So, I mean, even though you're confessing, it's just so that we can get a court order because there were scratches on the body that nobody ever did DNA testing on because Gene was a witness and he told you, who killed him. He saw the whole thing play out. But we find out that she was missing a nail. She got her nails done. She's part of the mob family. She always looks good. And you see that she had a Band-Aid on one of her fingers, that her nail had come off, and you see the scratches on the mobster. So Elsbeth is like, all right, you had a spat with him about the baby. You got angry. You scratched him out of rage. You hit you put the corkscrew in his chest, and then you shot him twice, which is the MO of the rivalry mob so that you can blame it on them. Gene saw the whole thing and then you guys had a deal. But Gene Sr. is mad because he's realizing she's been in the mob business the whole 20 years, and now wants to bring in her son. So he agrees to it. Which again, like I said, I knew at some point she was going to do that because Judge Cropper was like, ho, 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 well, the only way you'd be able to do it is get a new confession, knowing there's no way she could ever do that. Well, boom, there is the way she can do that, which I thought was great. I was so happy to see that. So the end of the movie is she interrupts one of the the famous crime tour, same tour guy that she had with Teddy and Roy, and says, no, that's not how it happened. And, Alyssa Milano's character was like, what are you doing? Get out of my restaurant. And she's like, this is what happened. And she's like, stop talking. You need to leave. And then Gene Jr., the son, was like, no, I'd like to hear it out. And I think I kind of know what happened next. So Gene Jr. is kind of like, okay, I think you did it too. So, I mean, it was interesting how she kind of did this is what happened, in front of a lot of different people instead of just in the police station or with the suspect. So, the police come in and arrest her because now they have proof, which I thought was great. Like I say, I love the way she kind of, and then what is so terrible is Alyssa Milano then goes, well, Gene killed him. And like, she's even trying to blame it on somebody else. Like, I was just like, you're heartless. Like, I knew you were anyways because you killed your own family member or somebody in your mob, in your circle. And then blame it on a rival mob and then watch them battle it out. And so I feel bad for Gene Jr., right? His mom killed his biological dad and then attempted to kill his dad who raised him, right? And then after attempting to kill him, then when it's time for her to get arrested, she's blaming him for doing it. So I'm like, the poor kid, like, right? I mean, luckily he was able to stay out of the business, at least Senior, once he realized that, wanted to keep him out of the business. But the poor kid, and then at the end, Gene Jr. hugs Gene Senior and says, yeah, I kind of always knew you probably weren't my dad. Like, I could tell the resemblance. But you are my dad and you'll always be my dad. And then he hugs him and you have that moment and he kind of gives a head nod to Elsbeth, like, yeah, thanks, thank you. Because remember, Elsbeth said, confess to the crime. It's not going to stick. We just need it to exhume the body. We know who did it. And he agreed because he wants his son he doesn't want his son to get into the business. I mean, who wouldn't? I don't want my son to get into a mobster business. So I love that. Like, he really is, doing this for his son. So I absolutely love that. I loved the way it ended. And then, Roy and Elsbeth are just getting along so well. He's going to start a podcast and can I interview Elsbeth? And Elsbeth was like, sure, I'll interview you. So, and then as they're going in and he's interviewing the other detective, Teddy goes, I'm thinking of breaking up with them. And like I said at the beginning of my video, I kind of thought that was coming because they were showing how well they were getting along. And you could tell Teddy, I don't want to say Teddy was annoyed by it, but he was kind of like, I don't know, his two worlds are colliding a little too well. And so Elsbeth was like, why? You like Roy. But he was like, is it because we're too close? You know what I mean? I could feel like Elsbeth can kind of sense that. So I hope they don't break up because I think Teddy and Roy are very adorable together. Roy even defended Elsbeth to Teddy, which I think was a little bit of why he was going through the route of breaking up with them. Like, you like my mom so much, you're defending her to me. You're supposed to take my side. You're my boyfriend, right? But at any rate, I liked the three of them together because, like I say, Elsbeth is so cheery anyways. to see her around her son is like it just makes her glow. And Carrie Preston is such an amazing actress. I love it. I love watching her play Elsbeth. And then, of course, her real life husband Michael comes in for her scene with Judge Crawford, and which is great. I am so looking forward to that side story. And honestly, in my opinion, make it a slow burn, like make it draw it out, because it in real life it's going to be difficult to take down a judge. He's a very powerful man. He's been doing it for a long time. I'm sure he's got dirty cops and powerful people in his pocket. So I know it's going to be difficult to take them down, but I enjoy every time they're on screen together. So I look forward to that. And then the last episode, you see Captain Wagner talk about promoting Kayla from a beat cop to being promoted to a detective, which is exciting. However, that means that they're going to have another beat cop to kind of partner with Elsbeth. Which is kind of sad because Kayla and Elsbeth, I just love their friendship. They have such a great sisterhood. They really care for each other. They work well together on the case. Elsbeth and Kayla, they really respect opinions of each other and just work really well with the whole department. So it's going to be interesting how that's going to play out, because I love Kayla. I still want her to be a main character. So if they're going to get another beat cop, are you going to make them one of the main characters, or are you still going to have Kayla be like the assigned detective to, Elsbeth and the beat cop, right? So it's going to be interesting how that plays out, because Captain was like, it won't be the same. If we get another beat cop, it's not going to be the same, because Kayla and Elsbeth are so great together. So I think that's going to be interesting how the writers play that out. Please keep Kayla as a main character. I love her dynamic on the show with Captain Ragnar, and the camaraderie and just the chemistry she has with Elsbeth. They are a great partnership. So if you do get another beat cop to watch Elsbeth, please make them be more of a minor role and make Kayla be the detective on the cases, and so that she can still interact a lot with Elsbeth. That's just my 2 cents. I'm sure they're going to cast a great actor or actress to go along with it, but I like it the way it is. The preview for next week looks interesting. It's about a psychic. So anytime you have psychics involved with court cases and police cases, it's definitely interesting, right? I don't have anything against psychics. I just personally don't believe in them myself. But I enjoy watching the shows with them because I always think it's interesting. So definitely exciting. I hope you enjoyed my review. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And until next week, I will see you then. Bye.